London, 1888, a metropolis at the height of the British Empire. But lurking in its shadows was a nameless terror. In the dark, fetid alleys of Whitechapel, a district marked by poverty and despair, a killer began a reign of panic that would echo through the centuries. He was never caught. His name, or the name he chose, became synonymous with unfathomable evil. Jack the Ripper. Who was he? Why did he commit such brutal acts? And how did he vanish without a trace? More than a century later, these questions remain unanswered, fueling one of the greatest and darkest mysteries in criminal history. To understand the Ripper, we must understand his stage. Whitechapel in the East End of London was a labyrinth of narrow streets, dead-end alleys, and miserable slums. A place where life was worth little, especially for the women who sold their bodies on the dark streets just to survive. The police were overwhelmed, the gaslighting was dim, and the thick, constant London fog offered the perfect cloak for anyone who wished to hide. It was an environment of constant fear, but a familiar fear, of violence, theft, disease. No one was prepared for the kind of terror that was about to come, a terror that didn't just aim to take life, but to profane it in unimaginable ways. In the autumn of 1888, that latent fear erupted into absolute panic. A ghost seemed to walk the streets, choosing its victims from among the most vulnerable and vanishing into the night like smoke. Between August and November of that fateful year, 5 women had their lives brutally ended. Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, Mary Jane Kelly. They became known as the Canonical Five, the confirmed victims of the Ripper, though many believe he claimed more lives both before and after. The murders were shocking not only for their violence but for their macabre precision. Throats slashed with force and speed, horrific abdominal mutilations. In some cases, organs were removed. The brutality suggested uncontrollable rage, but the removal of organs indicated a certain anatomical knowledge or perhaps a dark ritualistic purpose. Who could do such a thing? The police found themselves facing a predator unlike anything they had ever encountered. He struck quickly in public places, yet somehow was never seen. He left behind scenes of carnage and a trail of terror that paralyzed the city. Scotland Yard launched a massive investigation. Hundreds of officers patrolled Whitechapel. Thousands of people were questioned. Suspects were detained, but soon released for lack of evidence. The killer seemed invisible, a specter moving through the shadows. And then came the letters, taunting messages sent to the police and the press, supposedly from the killer himself. The Dear Boss letter, signed Jack the Ripper, gave the monster his infamous name. Another, the From Hell letter, arrived accompanied by half of a human kidney, claimed to belong to Catherine Eddowes. Were they authentic? Or a cruel hoax by someone trying to heighten the chaos? The police were never sure, but the letters ignited the public's imagination and collective hysteria. The Ripper was no longer just a murderer. He had become an entity that mocked law and order, a demon who delighted in the fear he spread. With the killer eluding capture, theories about his identity began to flourish. More than 100 names have been considered over the years. There was Montague Druitt, a barrister found dead in the Thames shortly after the last canonical murder. Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant who suffered from hallucinations and was committed to an asylum. Michael Ostrog, a Russian con man with a history of violence. More elaborate theories pointed to figures of high society, such as the painter Walter Sickert, or even members of the royal family, like Prince Albert Victor, grandson of Queen Victoria. Each theory had its supporters, its circumstantial evidence, but none was ever conclusive. Was he a mad doctor with surgical knowledge, a local butcher, a foreigner who went unnoticed, a member of the elite with connections to cover his tracks, or something even more disturbing? An ordinary person living among everyone, hiding in unfathomable darkness. After the brutally horrific murder of Mary Jane Kelly in November 1888, The crimes bearing the Ripper's signature ceased as abruptly as they had begun. What happened to him? Did he die? Was he imprisoned for another crime? Did he simply stop? The killer's silence was perhaps the final act of his psychological terror. He left behind not only mutilated victims, but an open wound in the psyche of London and the world. The Jack the Ripper case became the archetype of the unsolved mystery, the gold standard for the horror of the anonymous serial killer. He was the first serial killer to create a frenzy in the global media. His mystery inspired countless books, films, and amateur investigations. New technologies, such as DNA testing on old artifacts, have brought new hopes and new controversies, but no definitive answers. Jack the Ripper remains a ghost, a shadow cast by the gas lamps of Victorian London, whose true face was lost in the fog of time. His legacy is a grim reminder of the darkness that can hide beneath the surface of civilization, and of the terrible truth that some mysteries may never be solved.